Hi, everyone. Welcome to the next episode of Friday with Friends. Today, I'm here with Eric, who I believe is my first Rotman Commerce guest on the podcast, which is very surprising. I've known Eric for maybe a year and a bit now. He first reached out to me when he was recruiting for Scotia S&T in his second year, which I did as well. And it's been great following his journey. So I'm excited to learn a bit more about his academic and recruitment path with all of you. Eric, first question I ask everybody, can you first share a bit about your upbringing, high school experience, and career interests at the time?
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's great to be on the podcast, and thanks so much to Wynette for inviting me on here. Really honored to be the first Rotman Commerce guest. But I would say growing up, I grew up in Mississauga, so obviously very close and had those like very typical GTA grow up experience. Um, but I honestly didn't know what it is I wanted to do in high school. I actually had ran my own business. So I was reselling like sneakers and clothing for a while in high school. So had that entrepreneurial mindset, but wasn't sure if that was something that was going to make money in the long term. And as you know, the parents always care about, what's going to make the most money. So I wasn't sure if I wanted to go into like medical school or do something within like, I don't know, dental school. So that's why I applied for both business programs and health sci programs. So I actually got into McMaster Life Sci as well. And that was something I was considering, but ultimately I went with Rotman Commerce just because, the two business schools I had gotten accepted into that I was considering was Schulich and Rotman. And I ended up going with Rotman because my parents really convinced me. Originally, I wanted to go to Schulich, but I'm really glad I went with Rotman. Um, no shade to Schulich, but I think Rotman was generally just like a better choice for me because being downtown opened up so many more opportunities that I don't think I would have had if I was in like the York area. And I don't know, just even being with like the friends that I've met and the people that I know now, I think was all credited to being in Rotman. So yeah, I felt like that was a really great experience overall. And I'm glad that I got waitlisted from Ivy, even though I was a little salty back then.
Yes, aren't we, or weren't we all salty about some of the rejections that we've had? Queen's Commerce, I'm looking at you, but it does work itself out at the end. I'm curious, in high school, what were you like? Like, did you like sports? Were you into school?
Honestly, high school, I think I had like a couple of different phases. Like I would say I was always like a good kid, but I would say in grade nine and grade 10, I was a little more of like influenced by the people around me. So like, back then it was like a very much so like hip hop culture and like Saga Man's culture. So I would say, completely different than who I am today. But grew from those experiences and honestly feel like I developed a bit of like my being aware of my surroundings from then because I would, just involve myself in like random situations. But I would say I became a lot more academic in my 11th and 12th grade. But we did have COVID, obviously. So I was just like at home. I played a lot of video games. Actually, interesting fact, I was really good at Valorant. So I was on the collegiate team at U of T in my first year until I quit because I got too addicted. But and interestingly enough, I actually quit for recruitment. So it's all full circle. But yeah, that's a little bit about my high school self.
Wow, I don't play Valorant, but I know like my cousins do, and they've also developed an addiction.
Yeah.
And I was addicted to a video game before. I mean, it was Minecraft, but it was the Minecraft Hunger Games, and I was like severely addicted in high school. So that's good that you recognize it. It is so hard to break free from video game addiction.
It is. It's actually really hard. Like, sometimes I would start skipping class to just play video games, and it's literally so bad.
Yeah, no, like in high school, I would pretend to be sick, and then I'm sorry, dad. My dad would like come and pick me up, and I would go home and play games.
Yeah, and then you're just like pretending the whole time, oh, I don't feel well.
Exactly. And he literally had to drive from work and he had to drive all the way back. Like that's how addicted I was. And it's not good. And I can't imagine like breaking free from it, especially when you're good at the game. Like I sucked, but you were good at it.
Yeah, no, it was hard, but like I feel like I just have like this thing where I really hyper focus on certain things. I feel like I have ADHD, but I'm not sure because I don't have the diagnosis. But I always hyper focus on things. So recruitment became like my new addiction almost, which sounds really bad, but that's just what it was like.
Well, maybe it's little bit better than Valorant. Leading into that, was Rotman Commerce your dream school? Where else did you apply? Can you recall the application and acceptance?
Like I mentioned, I applied for everywhere. Like my dream was probably like if I could get in somehow to McMaster Health Sci, because that's where I thought was going to be the best for my future. But I'm really glad I didn't get accepted because I think I would be a really bad pre-med student and I would have probably hated my life. And then I also applied for like Western Med Sci, Master Life Sci, so those like med programs. Um, I'm glad I did not go to them because I don't think I'm really fit for pre-med anyways. And then I applied in terms of business school for Rotman, York, Western, as well as Queens. I got waitlisted to Western, which was like I was really salty about because I really wanted to get into Western. Also got rejected from Queen's Commerce, but looking back, I feel like I deserved that rejection because I wrote some appalling things in my supplementary essay, which I'm actually not going to touch too much on, but yeah, I'm embarrassed thinking about what I wrote back then. Um, but yeah, I got accepted into Schulich as well as Rotman in terms of business schools and chose Rotman because of the location, because of like the name of U of T. And yeah, really glad I did because I think I made a lot of lasting connections here.
You live in Toronto, you live off campus. Would you like, I can't even imagine, like, yeah, Hamilton's really boring at McMaster. So, like, what does a U of T student do for fun? Like, do you guys like go out, like eat? There's so much stuff you can do.
Yeah, there's honestly a lot of stuff. Like studying at cafes is like endless because there's like always new cafes you can study at. There's endless like bubble tea places that I go to, endless like dessert places. So it's really nice being able to have like the city is basically your studying spot. And then, there's also like the campus is huge as well because there's like a whole section of the city dedicated like to U of T campus.
Mm.
So it is very nice being able to like there's like so many places to discover. Like whenever I have exams, whenever I meet up with friends, it's like I've never been in this building before, and it's always like something new. Um, and then I would say like in terms of going out, like I personally just like to eat a lot of stuff. So we always just go out to eat, but I've obviously like there's clubbing. And I would say like in terms of like the social scene, it's more so like clubbing rather than house parties or like even frat parties compared to like some of these other schools that there are. We don't really have like a major event like St. Patty's Day at Laurier or Hoko at Western. Like there's nothing super school spirity at U of T. So I would say that might be the downside of going to a school in the city. But otherwise, I would say everything else is very nice because the convenience for everything is like amazing. And like the subway, honestly, like people complain about it, but I love the subway. So yeah, I find it really nice because I can get to like Kipling in like 20 minutes and then go home. So it's so easy.
Nice. So Eric's probably the first one that loves TTC. Okay, love that for them. And what about coffee chats? Like, we'll get into this, but like
Yeah.
when I've had to have a coffee chat and I was in Hamilton, I had to go Hamilton go train to Union, walk. Like, is it like seriously? Can you just like set up a coffee chat and it's not like a big deal to you? Like, you can just do it and then go back and like study. Like, it doesn't dictate your day.
Yeah, it truly doesn't. Like sometimes like you can have like 3 to 4 coffee chats in one day, if you schedule them right and then just like go back to studying. Or even if you have a one-off coffee chat, it's like, okay, like maybe I'll have to wear something nicer to class, but then after class I'll go do the coffee chat and then I'll go study. And it's all within the general vicinity. Although I would say the hardest part is like getting to financial district because it is a bit off compared to where the rest of the stuff is. But yeah, at least my apartment is right on Bloor Young. So I'm able to subway to like financial district in like 10 minutes, do my chat and then come back, which is really nice and makes it a lot more convenient.
Like, I cannot even fathom this, and it is such like an advantage. It is such an advantage because like I know like McMaster students, like they would have to line up like 5 in one day. They're like, okay, everyone, I'm going to Toronto on Tuesday. Does anyone want to join? Like, it's such a huge deal. But like,
Yeah,
students, you're discovering what you want to do. Like, what if you don't vibe with the people? Well, I just wasted like a day at Mac.
That's true.
So that's huge. That's amazing. How was the adjustment from high school into university, and particularly in such a large and competitive school like U of T and Rotman? I've heard that your first year econ classes are really hard. I don't know if that's true or not.
I would honestly say econ wasn't as bad because I did the IB program in high school. Um, and even though we had COVID years, so we never had any actual like final IB exams, which would have been way more stressful. So I still got the credit though, so I didn't have to do like a lot of like requirements. I got 3 full credits for free going into university. So that was because I did like HL economics, HL biology, and HL English. So through that, I learned a lot of like those Rotman like economics concepts. So I feel like I did pretty well with that in first year. I would say the hardest for me was actually our first year math program. And it's actually the easiest math course at U of T. But that year, for some reason, like the professor decided to change the way it was structured to try to fit in like basically like 2 or 3 years of curriculum into like one math course because business students didn't take math after first year. So yeah, that one was really hard for that year, and the professor got like a lot of bad reviews. So they ultimately changed it back, but I would say that was my biggest struggle for that year. But yeah, Rotman does have like a lot of required courses for first year to make sure you actually get into the official program in second year. And I know a lot of people wouldn't be able to pass their first time, so they would take summer school to try to make it into the program. And I would say that's very common.
And what about socially, like being in the city?
Yeah. For me, first year I lived on res. I was at Woodsworth College, so that was like one of the newer suites, and I think it was really nice because I was like right on campus, and there were like a lot of people would go on like frat parties or house parties. Not a lot of clubs yet because we were all still 18 going to university. But honestly, for me, I chose not to do as much of that because one, I was still like addicted to gaming. And two, I was like mainly just like focusing on like the friends I already had, made some new friends. But I would say first year I was pretty socially stunted, at least in Rotman. It wasn't until like the end of first year that I made like new friends, and then the second year was when I feel like I thrived with starting a lot more like friendships and like a lot more relationships.
In transitioning from your addiction to gaming to your addiction to recruitment, let's talk about your entire internship journey so far. So not only like the applications you sent out, the places that you've interned in, and like the ones that you will, but like even the challenges that you encountered along the way, starting from first year.
Oh man, so it's a really long journey, and I mean, I'm really glad to be where I am at now, but looking back, like yeah, in first year, I initially learned I wanted to do finance in like September of my first year. So it's like very early, which I'm very like happy about because not everyone has that opportunity to be able to know about that. I got this random like club email in my folder about like some mentorship program you had to pay 25 bucks for. And then they had these like firm logos of where people worked. So I was like, okay, yeah, sure. Like I should just do this. That's where I learned about capital markets and learned where to start looking for my internships. So for my winter of my first year, I actually took on 2 internships at the same time, which were like both part-time and unpaid. And I was like, why just do one when I could do two? So I went with like this search fund that was like in the US, but it was like online, unpaid as well, which ultimately I think gave me that experience on my resume. I had another boutique like investment banking firm, which was also part-time and unpaid. And so those I think paved my way into my first internship at BMO. And that was within private wealth, but I would say it was more of an administrative role than anything, just because I wasn't first year. But I was really glad I was able to get into a bank at least and work for a bank. For that one, honestly, I just did a lot of networking with recruiters because I feel like as a first year, that's more important than anything than actually talking with like these super high finance careers and like talking to like these people in the industry. I felt like recruiters was more useful for me. And then at the same time, by the end of my first year, I was already recruiting for my second year internship. And I was really happy I knew that I needed to do that because of the clubs that I had joined and the people that I had like talked to. So by that time, I was already networking with a lot of people and having coffee chats pretty much like every day of the week. So I'd say March and April of my first year, I was really busy with doing that recruitment stuff. And it was in April of my first year that I got my offer for the next summer, for summer 2023. Um, So that was pretty exciting. I landed like with Scotiabank in their sales and trading division as a summer analyst. And then after that, I feel like I had like a complete sense of like relief. And I pretty much stopped all recruitment efforts because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm finally done. I'm so happy. And then it wasn't until second year started and the clubs that I was in were like, all right, it's time to pick up the pace for third year recruitment now. That's where it's most important. And so my friends that I had made, like really close friends I'd made, were like, yeah, I've been doing some coffee chats already. And I was like, oh man, it's back to this. But it's almost like something's clicked in me where it's like, as soon as I know I need to start recruitment again, I actually get really excited about it. And I start trying really hard and putting as much as my effort into it as possible. So I reached out to as many people as I could, sent out so many emails, like countless, had a lot of coffee chats, and I also knew I wanted to ultimately get into New York. So that's where I was doing a majority of my coffee chatting. I felt pretty confident about being able to land in Toronto, given that I was already at Scotiabank. My idea was thinking that if I don't get into New York, then I'll either just stay at Scotiabank or I'll, chat with some of these other Toronto firms. But I really want to get in New York, just to get like in a good place to start my career. And so I chatted with a lot of different people, had a lot of interviews, and it's interesting because my interviews I did for New York were actually pretty late compared to Canadian interviews. So it was in, I would say like a majority of them was in May when I was already in my Scotiabank internship. So I actually had like a lot of interviews then, and I would like essentially like jump out of work for like 30 minutes and I would just tell my interviewers, yeah, I just hopped off the trading floor, but let's do this interview. And I think that was really nice because like they're like, oh, okay, so you're already working on the trading floor. We're about to interview you for S&T. So that was like a really nice bonus sometimes. Um, but yeah, I interviewed for a lot of firms, ended up placing at Bank of America within global markets, and I'll be working with them next summer. But I'm super excited for that. I think it really came full circle because I was able to like essentially linearly achieve like the next step every time I tried to go for something better. And not necessarily better, but like what was the next step in my mind. And yeah, I'm really proud with where I went. And the interview process was definitely hard at times. And I don't want to like keep talking and just like talking and talking, but I'll share like one interesting story was with this firm I was interviewing with. It was with Evercore. So it was a very, I would say, very fun but long interview process because it was a very small and niche team. So I essentially had like four first rounds where I talked with like a majority of the people on their team. And then they flew me out to New York, and that's where I did my super day. So that was like, I felt so businessy when I was being flown out for the interview because I was like on a quick turnaround. I was like in and out of New York within 24 hours. I was like on this flight wearing my suit, and it was like, yeah, I felt very professional. Didn't get the offer, but I was still very happy with like, just being able to have that experience. And yeah, I'm very happy about that because I feel like I got that intern interview experience.
I've heard of like firms that fly kids out
Yeah.
wherever they live, and yeah, they go back to their city in 24 hours, but I didn't know anyone that actually did it. So was that for Evercore investment banking, or do they also have a capital markets like sales and trading type B team?
So it was within private capital advisory, which is still housed under their investment banking team, but it was with a very niche group where they focused more on like asset-backed securities, which was very directly applicable to my internship at Scotia, which is why I think I got the interview because I
Mm.
actually cold applied for them. Like I didn't do any networking, and I, got all the way to the super day. So I guess if you do have relevant work experience, then it's very possible.
Yes, that's what I keep telling like Canadian students. Like, if you have a second year front office internship, honestly, don't underestimate the cold apply to New York. Like,
Yeah.
don't underestimate it because like looking at restaurants, like, first of all, like Canadian students, like, I say this all the time, but like they study like commerce and like like technical skills, whereas a lot of American schools, like, they study economics, so they may not know these technical things. And then they're like, damn, he's already, at Scotiabank doing like securitization or whatever it is. Like it helps a lot. So if you are lucky enough to land like a second year summer internship front office in Toronto and you want to go to New York and you're discouraged that your school has like no alumni or barely any, or you can't like get on the phone with them, McMaster, just do it, because like you never ever know. So thanks for bringing up that point. Another thing, I liked what you said. First year, you recommend that first years like reach out more to campus recruiters because you don't have a lot of experience, and I think there are a lot of first years that ask me like that question as well, and I think I agree. I think they're also a bit more approachable. Would you
Yeah,
say that?
they are. They're always like very smiley, and I think that's part of the job of HR is making students feel welcome. So
Mm-hmm.
definitely a little easier as their first year.
Got it. Could we get a little bit more detail about your experience recruiting as a second year for Scotia S&T? Did you know much about financial markets? Basically, being a first year, how did you fill any knowledge gaps there?
Yeah. So it's very interesting. I think a majority of it was going through these clubs, and I was very grateful being able to be in some of these clubs because I feel like not every student has the same access to the clubs, especially in their schools, who may not even have these like finance clubs. So I got a lot of my information from that. I was able to prepare like both behaviorally and technically. These upper years would give me their old guides that they went through. And it's interesting because a majority of people preparing for sales and trading will actually use the IV sales and trading guide. Um, so that was like the probably the most important resource I used. And then there's like lists of questions, and I basically prepared my answer for like 100 different questions that I thought could be asked. Because I use like a bunch of different guides. There's also like for sales and trading, like the Vault sales and trading guide, which is a little older, but I still found pretty useful. Um, and I essentially just read as much news as I could. I used like the student subscription with Bloomberg, and then I'd read as much news as I can, and then try to like understand where my outlook is on it. Because I feel like for a lot of interviews, they care about what your thoughts are, especially with sales and trading. So that's the way I went about it. And then I think for Scotiabank, I went through like this program. It was called Next 50. So they essentially chose like a bunch of students who would join like this conference and then get secured a next summer internship. And so I went through that process. The application was interesting. It was actually like a video application. So we had to make like a 1 minute creative video explaining why we should be accepted. And then for my like gimmick, I finished my video off by doing it in front of the Scotiabank like building in Toronto. So once again, perks of being in Toronto, perks of being in Rotman. But yeah, that's how I essentially applied. I talked with a lot of recruiters and with a lot of people in the industry as well. But I think as you do recruitment, you'll realize some firms are more recruiter heavy, some firms are more industry heavy. So it really depends on which firms you're applying to.
Great point. I always kind of knew in the back of my mind that there were some firms that, the recruitment has a lot of pull, like HR, but I
Yeah.
never worded it in such a great way that you did. And Scotiabank is definitely recruiter heavy. Like it's also they use the plum profile too. And do you really think a managing director is going to go through the plum profile? Like they have no idea what that means. So yeah, like it's hard to like make a list exactly of like which ones are more recruitment heavy, which ones are more industry heavy. But I think you just kind of learn by doing a lot of coffee chats and realizing like, and then also like, oh, I talked to like 5 recruiters here, but I still didn't get an interview. What's that about? So it's definitely like trial and error to figure out who your targets are for each. But it's good to network with all. Can you speak about your extracurricular involvement in university? Was it difficult to get involved and into these clubs that you keep speaking so highly about?
So I would say I think it differs for every university, but for Toronto in Rotman Commerce, there are a couple of main clubs that like exist. So I would say like TSIC, which is Toronto Student Investment Council. There's RCFA, which is Rotman Commerce Finance Association. I'd say those are probably like 2 main clubs at U of T. And it is difficult. I think every year like they have applicants, but a lot of times it really comes down to fit and where the people on the team right now, like how much they vibe with you, how much networking you've done, even like your work experience that's coming up, like that's all taken into a factor. So it's almost like if you don't know where to start, then it's almost harder to start in the clubs, if that makes sense, because they almost expect you to already know some of your stuff. So for me, I got a lot of my foundation from like mentorship programs, which were paid, or just like mentorship programs that you had to apply for. So I think that's very helpful if your school organizes like any kind of mentorship program that anyone can apply to or anyone can get into. And then from that, you build your foundation and then you apply to these clubs. A lot of times you apply at the end of your first year or you apply at the start of your second year. So that's how I kind of went through the process. And once you're in those like more, I wouldn't say elite, but more exclusive clubs, that's when you're able to get access to a lot more information and a lot more like alum that you maybe wouldn't have had access to before.
I used to think that clubs were just a social thing, and it is true. Like you do make friends through clubs, but I think especially for the finance clubs or consulting clubs or even sales clubs, like career focused clubs, the knowledge is invaluable. And you keep saying like, "Oh, I'm so grateful. I knew that I had to recruit for S&T, at the end of my first year, and like timelines and stuff like that." Like, how is someone supposed to know that? Like, that's not something you would think of. And that's the clubs. Those are the up years that are feeding that to you. Question number 7. Can you tell us about your new venture, Mockt? If you go on Eric's LinkedIn, he's a co-founder for Mockt. So let's hear a little bit about that.
Yeah, so it's very cool because I think it came full circle for us when me and my co-founders, Adam and Hassan from both from Rotman Commerce, like we all came together. We've been through this recruitment journey together, and one thing we really realized was important when we were preparing for interviews was mock interviews. So that's something that we did a lot of. And I know one of my co-founders did like 20 or 30 mock interviews with upper year students before he landed like his jobs. So like I know some people who did like even more than that. So all that to say, we found that mock interviews were really important and access was actually a lot more difficult than we had thought. We talked to like some of these other students and even ourselves, like we had to almost like humble ourselves and beg these upper years to do the mocks for us. And it's very great because they're willing to do it. And it's kind of like a pay it forward system where you got mocks done for you. When you're in upper year, you give mocks to younger students. So I think that system was very good, but it's honestly not the best when it comes to democratizing access for all students because you have to like know someone to be able to get this access for interview prep. So we came together, we're building a platform, and I'll keep it a little more ambiguous because things are still in the works. We're building a platform where, essentially access to these mock interviews will be more democratized, and we're trying to make it as accessible to students as possible. So at this point, we're trying to make it free for students. How that goes about though is something we're still trying to build out, and we're talking with a lot of different schools. So yeah, ultimately, if you think this is something that you might be interested in, shameless promo, we're still having like a simple wait list where we're having people whoever are interested in just filling out their names and their school email address. And we're trying to gauge interest on who might be interested, or if there's people in other schools that might be interested outside of U of T, Mac. There's like so many different schools where we think this could be a benefit to. So yeah, we're really trying to build this out and make this as accessible for students as possible.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm sure there's going to be a lot more like news soon to come. And you're really right about the humbling experience, like almost on your knees begging for people to do a mock interview. Like, why is it so humiliating? Because like also it's not just like a coffee chat, okay? Like mock interviews, like the person that's doing the mock interview has to like stay up to date with the news. If it's S&T, like they have to like be engaged with it, and it's kind of a lot of work on the interviewer side, but then at the same time, like as a student, like you need this help. So I think having a platform that can kind of consolidate everything, make sure that everyone is paid accordingly before like the work on both sides, and it's less humiliating and just like kind of awkward for both parties, like that would be such a game changer.
Yeah, exactly. And we're trying to make it as like hands off as possible. So like it's not gonna be like, you're a student who wants a mock, you don't have to ask anymore. Like you can just go on the, platform and then book it with whoever's available. And then on the other side, as an interviewer, you already have like questions ready for you. You have like, the meeting set up for you. You don't have to worry about what time you're free or what you're gonna ask, or like I think it'll be a much more consolidated platform, like you said, for both parties. That's what we're really trying to build out.
Oh, that's great. And like having like questions that are relevant to that field on the platform. Because I'm thinking like if someone asked me to do like a tech sales interview, like it would be helpful to have some prompts going at least so that I know like kind of how that interview would go, because it's been a while since some upper years may have recruited too. So that also democratizes mock interviews on the other side as well, like as interviewers, making it easier and more accessible for us to provide those services. So I didn't think of that. That's really cool.
I feel like, we've talked with students and a lot of them like just feel like, they wish they had this available. So we've been thinking about building this for a while, and now that we're done our second year summer internships, we're in third year, kind of like just waiting for full time to start, and waiting for our summer internships to start. So yeah, we really felt like this would be a value add for students by building this out now.
Yeah, definitely. And I will include Eric's LinkedIn in the description below, as well as Mockt, so you can check them out. And then signing up for the waitlist, is that under like Mockt's LinkedIn?
So it's just like a Google Forms link. So
Okay.
maybe I'll send that to you and then you can.
Yeah. So we'll have all three of those links in the description for all of you. Why is early career training and recruitment important to you?
I would say it's so important because a lot of students think that, once you graduate, you can start at a smaller role and then kind of build your way up. But I would say it's actually much better to shoot for the stars while you're in undergrad, because you actually limit yourself to a lot of opportunities when you think you're not good enough in undergrad, and then you realize you want to do these careers, but it's actually a lot harder to go from career to career than from student to a really good career. So I would say that's like one of the biggest things I hear from a lot of students is like they ask me, oh, if I want to do investment banking, is it better if I start as a bank teller now and then kind of build my way up? But I think you kind of just have to talk to people who've done it before and trying to figure out like, what it is that makes them successful, whether that's, their work experience or their network. And I'd say for me, in building my early career, the three most important things was this triangle of network, work experience, and grades. So I would say those are like the three pillars for like recruiting for honestly any job out there. Because at the end of the day, those are the three most important things. And if I were to pick two, honestly, grades would be out of it. It would be work experience and network. Because I feel like for me personally, like my grades are not like the best in the world, but I was still able to place in New York because I had grinded so hard for the network. And I had this like previous work experience in my second year summer that I think really propelled me. So I think that's something like a preconceived notion that students really have to get out of in terms of their mindset is like, one, grades are the most important thing in the world, because they're not. And two, like I can, build my way up this career after I graduate, and once I'm more qualified, because ultimately that actually does make it a little harder. And you may have to pursue like graduate degrees or like other stuff when you could just do it in undergrad and figure out what it is that you really want.
I think like internships are so invaluable. Like they're actually trying to take students that have no experience. Like they know they have no experience. When are
Yeah.
you going to get the opportunity? Like, yes, you can build your way up, but how many years will that be? And yeah, graduate school, that could be costly. Like that could be $200,000 to break into investment banking when you could just reach for the stars. What if you talk to someone like you? Like when they're in first year and they just like kind of understand your path, or they're listening to these podcasts. Like this is free. The time is money, especially in university. Like your undergrad, I always thought like maybe like, oh, I had to go to grad school afterwards if I wanted to do like anything like really, really like high paying or whatever. But those opportunities are out there and it's just about shooting for them. Grades. Oh my gosh, like the students that you see going off to New York, I bet they're not number one in their class. I bet sometimes they skip class to go do coffee chats. Like that is the truth, y'all. Like I was stressed out in first year being like, I need to get A pluses or I'm not gonna get a good job. No. Like you know what? You know what's good? You know what's just as good, actually better? Getting a bunch of A minuses and spending 5 hours a week talking to people. That's what's gonna get you the job.
100%. And I feel like I can really mirror that, because when I was in my first year, like I was stressing over not getting good enough grades, but then I was prioritizing like my network and like my recruitment. And I think ultimately it did pay off. Like there was this one specific day where I was like, I could make this Scotiabank application video, or I could study more for my exam that I don't think I'm going to do really well in. And I went for the Scotiabank application video. So I think you really got to prioritize where you think will better position yourself for the future, and that may not always be grades.
Exactly. At least for business. Like if you're trying to go to med school, I don't
Yeah.
know what that's like, but in the business world, it really is like who you know, plus a little bit of what you know. Like that 3.5 threshold is real. Okay, that's real. But then after that, like a 3.7 versus like a 4.0, like I think it's the network that's going to make a difference there. What excites you about being a founder? Not just in particular like with Mockt, but like are there any new like challenges and things like you've learned being a co-founder?
Yeah, I mean, it's really amazing being able to like kind of work based on what you know and like things that are developing. It's like very unstructured almost, but in a way, it's like structured but unstructured, because like you're creating those frameworks for yourself as you continue like your business. So my co-founders and I, we like work together all the time and just bounce ideas off of each other. We're like drawing stuff on like diagrams or like our iPads. I remember like when we started this idea, we were actually like in after I think it was a night out in my apartment in the lobby, and we were just talking until like 5 a.m. So that was like such a memorable moment. And then we had went on a trip together to Vancouver, went through some like I don't know, some really amazing life experiences together. And then ultimately, like I think that that's all to say being a founder is like really, really exciting. And I think mirrors, what it is that like kind of like gets me out of bed every morning. Cause like honestly, for school, it's not what gets me out of bed every morning. A lot of times, like I'll sleep in, I'll skip class. But then when I have something to do, when it's time for like to do mock, when it's time to do mocked or it's time to do stuff related to the company, that's when I get really excited. And I think that almost that like engagement with students, being able to help other students, and especially because our platform is more so like democratizing this access, it's almost like something I'm so passionate about that I just want to work on, and it feels really nice.
Yeah, especially because you're giving back. And just like I'd argue a year ago, you would be one of the students that were looking to use Mockt,
Exactly.
so that's super cool. And I definitely relate. Like getting out of bed to like go to like a fourth year econ class versus like filming a podcast, like it just hits different. So I understand that. And I think that's cool that you guys founded something that you like kind of overpowers like I don't know the other work in school that you have, and it's such like a good feeling.
Literally, yeah, it's an amazing feeling. Like through the Mockt program, like we've done like some beta testing, and then we talked to some students who eventually get interviews, and then like convert those interviews into placements, and that just like makes us feel so good about the program that we're building. Because yeah, every single student's success story like just makes us feel so excited.
Their win is your win. And I'm just wondering here, this is a bit of a tangent, but when you were doing some beta testing and speaking to prospective customers, prospective students on the platform,
Yeah.
do you have to involve like a little bit of like psychology, like not just like, oh, like setting up the interviews itself, but like, I don't know, their difficulties with recruiting, how recruiting makes them feel, how interviews make them feel. Like you have to think a little bit deeper about those things as well.
Yeah, I think that's one thing we do a lot with like interviewer and user interviews is when we were starting to like validate our idea, and I think every business goes through this, like you talk to your customers or you talk to like the people who might use your platform, and honestly, you let them do a lot of the talking. Like you ask them like how it is that you're feeling about your recruitment cycle, or what's like some of the things that you're like finding difficult. And I think that's the best way to actually find out if your business is something that's valuable and not just pushing it in front of their face like, we built this platform, would you use it? And it's like, yeah, I feel like that's something we learned from doing a lot of different user interviews and finding out like what was actually the most insightful for us. So there might be a little bit of psychology in that you're not directly telling them exactly what it is you're going to do, but you're actually letting them talk more and then like share what it is that they're struggling with, because that's where you find the gap in the needs.
You can imagine that the conversations with students in a frustrating recruitment cycle, you'd get a lot of great info and how you can fill those gaps, and that's just so much easier for both parties than like yeah, like making a pitch deck about Mockt.
And it's like some of these students, like we've presented to them, like, so we also work with like the career services at Rotman to like help some of these other students. And we've presented like our calendars when we were in peak recruitment season. And I remember this one girl went to one of my co-founders and was literally just ranting to him about how crazy it was that the calendar was like, because it was like, we showed them my calendar when I was like during peak recruitment season. There's like, I think 10 to like 8 to 10 chats every week. And then she was just like, she's getting close to that time, and it's like crazy because she has no idea where to start. And so just students like that, I think, really helped us like validate our product, because like we're like getting ready for these interviews is very hard if you don't know what to do. And I think that's our biggest motivator going into this company.
I can definitely tell like not only are you passionate, but you do have a lot of knowledge on this subject. I think just by pure grit and resilience, like recruiting for New York is just crazy. Tied to that, what would you like to do 10 years from now?
Yeah, 10 years from now. Honestly, it's really hard to say because for the first couple of years of my career, I really want to be, um, be able to be close to family. So the good thing is New York is only like a 1 hour flight away from Toronto, which is really nice. I think I do want to start my career in New York. And I'm really excited to be able to do that because a lot of my family is also in New York, like being able to see my grandma for, this summer, as well as hopefully when I start full time. Yeah, I think that will be a really great experience. But ultimately, I feel like ever since I've been young, I've always had this like entrepreneurial mindset. So whether that's like innovating something at work or it's innovating something on my own, I feel like that's something I really want to do within the next 10 years. And hopefully while I'm still in university, be able to build this out with Mockt, with my co-founders, and help as many students as we can. And next 10 years, honestly, don't know what that'll look like because I'll be 30 years old in 10 years, and I'm really not sure what that'll look like, but hopefully, even on personal life level, like hopefully going to start a family soon by then. But I don't know, that's a lot more to think about and maybe not ready for that crisis yet.
That's a great way to put it. I don't think many of us are, especially like the ones like me that just graduated. It's a little bit of its own, mind work. But
Yeah.
we'll save the 30-year-old mind work for down the line. Now the last question here is, what advice would you like to give to students? I originally had looking to break into S&T stateside, but I like to open this up to like students that are ambitious in general, let's say like first and second year, and they just don't know where to start.
Yeah. I would say don't limit yourself to what it is you think you can do. I feel like one recurring thing I've been saying is honestly, as an undergrad student, the doors are open for everything. As long as you put your heart and like your mind into it. I would say if you want to do finance, then network with as many people as you can from different industries and figure out what it is that really matches with what you want to do. Because I've known so many students who thought they wanted to do investment banking, and then they break in and they realize it's really not for them. I've known so many students who, thought they wanted to do something else, but then, talk to people in investment banking and realize they really want to do that because, they want to be able to provide for their families or like do all these different things. So I feel like the most important thing is figuring out what your interests are and not limiting yourself. For me, I feel like I didn't know how entrepreneurial I was going to university. And that's when, this year when we started Mockt, I've realized how much it fueled my passion. But at the same time, I realized how thankful I was for this whole recruitment cycle and this whole recruitment journey because it taught me a lot of things about myself that I otherwise wouldn't have known. So I would say be open, but at the same time, don't feel like you have to be different from everyone either. Because I feel like that's one thing that a lot of people feel pressure about is either I'm scared because I don't think I fit in, or I'm scared because I feel like I have to be different. And you're always on that like balancing act of like, how similar am I with others, or how different am I from others? And like, I don't feel like I'm similar enough to be in this career, or I feel like all these students are doing something different that I feel like I have to as well. So I think these are two opposite spectrums that I see students often talking about. And I would say like, it's really your own life, it's your own career, and things are much bigger than just a job or just about what you're doing in your life. Like you have to consider different things. I considered a lot about family, work-life balance, all these different things that come into play. So I would say stay open, but at the same time, don't limit yourself to what you can do and don't be scared about having to always be different.
Wow, I'm not going to add anything because I just like to sum it up there. You said everything that I would ever want to say. So thank you so much, Eric, for joining me on this podcast, Friday with Friends. Hopefully we'll have some more Rotman Commerce students down the line. And yeah, I'll have all the links below, your LinkedIn, Mockt's LinkedIn, and the Google form if you want to join the waitlist. And I will see y'all in the next episode. Bye, everyone.